Welcome to ABA Inside Track, the podcast that's like reading in your car, but safer. I'm your host, Robert Perry Cruz, and with me as always are my fabulous co-hosts.
Oh, it's me. It's me, Jackie McDonald. I'm number 2 for the next 12 months.
And it's me, Diana Perry Cruz. Hello, hello.
I'm so glad you guys have created this weird rule. I think I've said that. I'm tired of
You've said that a lot of times now.
Okay, well, you've also said that you're going to make the change repeatedly. Mm-hmm. All right, this bit, it's done. We're moving on. We're going to talk about behavior analysis and behavior analytic research, which is what we do every week on this here podcast. We talk about relevant research articles around some sort of behavior analytic theme. See? Look at that. I tried a new opening.
I liked it.
You like that one?
Yeah.
I should have written it down. Oh, well. We'll go back to the old one another time.
You can actually re-listen to it because it is a podcast.
You know what I don't want to listen to is my own podcast.
Your own intro?
No, I used to do that. I don't need to do that anymore.
You're pretty consistent, honestly.
I know. I am great.
Because I've been looking at the transcripts for fun.
Yeah.
And you're pretty consistent in your intro and your outro.
Well, I mean, according to the transcript, the first thing anyone on this podcast says is the word foreign.
I think that was like maybe it's like the sound it makes when it plugs in or something.
I don't know. We've never said that to start a podcast.
Yeah.
And we're not saying it to start this podcast. Well, what are we going to talk about this week, folks? Well, we're going to talk about the changing criterion design.
That's right. It's the unicorn of experimental designs.
What, in the sense that nobody uses it?
Yes.
It's rare?
It's rare. It's super rare.
The only people who want to use changing criterion designs are grad students. It's their first study ever, and they're like, I'm going to do this.
Probably.
No, I don't think so.
Sometimes.
Yeah, I don't think so. This is a very utilized design if you are trying to increase or decrease something that's already happening, right? The only problem... The people get a bad rap with changing criterion because you're not actually teaching anything, right? Because the person already has the skill in their repertoire.
Yes.
And you're just trying to slowly increase it or slowly decrease it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. So it can be very useful under a very specific set of conditions.
It's a weak experimental design. It's
No.
I mean, it's not the strongest.
No. It can be, though.
It's not the strongest.
No, it's not the strongest, but it can be if you'd use bidirectionality. Just saying.
I mean, it's one of those things.
I feel like I'm fighting for the changing criterion against you, too.
I don't hate it. It's fine. It's a fine design. But there's a reason we don't see a lot of it in research. It's because usually there are other criterion, experimental control criterion that are going to provide, a more robust study, whereas in practice it may be more utilitarian. But anyway, we'll talk about it. All right, we did. I guess that's it. That's the episode. Thanks for coming, everyone. Dinah, what are we going to be discussing today?
Oh, sure. Let me tell you. We have three articles to talk about in this episode today. They are Best Practices in Utilizing the Changing Criterion Design by Klein, Houlihan, Vincent, and Panahan. And that was in Behavior Analysis and Practice 2017. Super article. I know we'll get into it. Really solid stuff.
I think they oversell it a bit in the title.
I, again, disagree with you.
Best practices?
No, I think it's great.
That doesn't mean that...
It is the best practice. They're saying, here's how you can use the changing criterion design.
No, it's a very thorough article, but then there's not like this is the only way to do it.
Because there's many ways that you can do it.
There's many ways
to
do it.
Okay.
I love that article. Diane and I actually simultaneously both chose that.
That's right, we did.
I don't dislike the article. I just think if you're going to call something best practices, I want to read it and be like, oh my God, I will use these practices every day. And I think when you're like, here are a couple good practices, and here's some stuff that people do, use what feels right for you. That's not best practices. That's like strong practices or great practices. But best practices, try again, Klein et al.
Best practices is like a phrase that you use when you're like, this is the best that we know. These are the current best practices. All right, well, here's what's probably not best practice is calling children obese and non-obese, but that's what's in the title of the next article, which is Effects of a Variable Ratio Reinforcement Schedule with Changing Criteria on Exercise in Obese and Non-Obese Boys. That was DeLuca and Holborn all the way back in 1992 in JABA.
I can say they did have an operational definition of what constitutes obese, and it was from the American Pediatric Association.
Yes.
So, yes, I don't think it's the best term, but at least it is a medical term, and it was defined. Yeah, I'm just going to solely sit on these articles.
Are you just going to be like antagonistic this
it's a 30-year-old article, so they probably would name it something differently today.
I agree.
And then finally, using mnemonics, remote coaching, and the range-bound changing criterion design to teach college students with IDD to make employment decisions by Brady, Kearney, Downey, Torres, and McDougall. That was in Education and Training in Autism and Developmental Disabilities 2022.
All right.
Yeah.
Great. Well, let's get started by just doing a quick overview of what constitutes a changing criterion design. So for folks who have not used one, or it's been a while since you've read your Cooper book, changing criterion design is one of our kind of, 4 major experimental designs, at least according to Cooper et al.'s, textbook, in which we have stepwise marks and we manipulate some dimension of a single behavior that's already, like you said, Jackie, already in an individual's repertoire. So it's not exactly a new skill acquisition design. It's more of a improvement or deceleration of a behavior in the repertoire.
Yeah.
You use it if you've got gradual shifts towards like a goal. So again, you need to either make increases over time, like maybe it wouldn't be safe to make a huge increase. Like for example, if you're using change of criteria in like a weightlifting program, you wouldn't be like, you only lift 10 pounds. What if you lifted 200 pounds because you'd hurt yourself? You want to go a little bit slower.
Yeah.
And you'd probably only exercise one more time. They'd be like, hooray, our reinforcement system worked. But then they broke their arm and said, I'll never exercise again. So not so good. Or if it's a behavior that is sort of resistant to change and you're not able to sort of make those, fabulous kind of withdrawal design changes of like behavior on, behavior off, and
right.
sort of more changing just some dimension of that behavior slowly over time. Now, the changing criterion design is one of those designs that I kind of love reading about the history in this article, because there's that sense of, and this is all from the Klein et al. Article, of it's sort of like the new kid on the block, like it only came around in the 70s. As opposed to all the other designs, which feel like they were in the Bible. They're so old and we can't ever change those designs. So we've got a book by Hall in 1971, and then a follow-up study by Weiss and Hall about reducing daily cigarette smoking was sort of the first use of changing criterion designs. But most people look at Hartman and Hall in 1976. So if you want to say, I'm using changing criterion design, you will put as your citation probably Hartman and Hall 1976.
That's what you should do.
I mean, well, if you're using like an original changing criterion design, we're talking about some more recent modifications to the changing criterion design in our examples. And it's sort of also referred to some sort of like Sidman design from the 60s. But at the end of the day, they described it as kind of like, it's like a multiple baseline design for shaping procedures, which is sort of true, though it's a little weird to say that because you can also use a changing criterion design within your multiple baseline design. So I don't know. It's like multiple baseline squared. So again, you want to accelerate or decelerate some dimension of a behavior. One of the challenges with changing criterion is, while it is a very useful design clinically, experimentally, you can really mess it up and sort of produce change that if you were, say, trying to publish, you're going to be told there's no experimental control here. You just did something. And your client might be happy, but you might not get your paper published. True. When you look at sort of the baseline logic, just like with any other study, you have to have a way to sort of do replication and prediction. And really what you're looking for is, when I have some sort of criterion, I want to see a change in some dimension of behavior. Could be rate, could be accuracy, could be magnitude. And you're sort of looking for this stable responding at each step so that you can make predictions. Like, see, I made a change in whatever my, independent variable is, and it showed this change in accuracy or rate or whatever dimension you're measuring.
So it's really a pretty precise type of behavior or experimental control that you would need to have, because you're not just looking to change behavior in a direction, which is usually kind of like what we're going for, but actually having behavior adhere or cluster around a particular numeric criterion, which is much more difficult to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think it's a really great design, right? Because you have to follow, that if you don't see experimental control, it's because you haven't picked the correct steps.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yes. So it's not easy to pull this one off. And like you said, Rob, another really important factor is that the behavior should already be within the person's repertoire, ideally, when you're starting this. And it's very often the case that this is going to be most successful if there is some level of rule following or understanding of those types of numeric measures as well. Because if you're saying, hey, you do 5 problems, you get the reinforcer, and then tomorrow you need to do 7 problems, having that verbal component, that instruction following piece can really help behavior adhere to those criterion much more quickly.
So within the design, if you want to strengthen your experimental control, you need to have lots of different sort of magnitudes of change. And while you usually are trying to either have those magnitudes of change go in one direction, you may also want to add what they call mini reversals. I like this. To differentiate from regular reversals, we're going to have mini reversals where you change your independent variable, you change some aspect of it so that you see either an acceleration or deceleration of the behavior. So example, when you're looking at your changing criterion graphs, you see your stepwise up, and then all of a sudden it goes back down.
Yes.
Which again, in clinical practice, most people would say, what the hell do you think you're doing? I want this to go up. And experimental control is usually not a reason people are excited. Oh, experimental control. I understand now. Thank you. You also want to change the length of phases. So some phases have to be longer than others. Again, you don't have to do this, but if you want to show experimental control, you need to sort of do all of these little steps to have any sort of chance of anyone saying, aha, I see your experimental control.
Those mini reversals are also called bidirectionality. Just so.
Well, that's what happened. That's what you're demonstrating.
Right. But I just want to make sure that
bidirectional criterion requirement.
Because they say that on the BACB exam. So, and the students that are listening, they won't say mini reversals. It'll say demonstrate bidirectional.
Jackie, I was told these are the best practices in the title. So it's mini reversal. You call the BACB and you complain and say, I want mini reversals on the task list.
Get me Jim Carr.
Jim, come on. What are you thinking? This article says best
Get Jim on the horn.
I know. For the next task list. Let's change that.
Yeah. So if we're talking about baseline logic, right, then we're talking about prediction, verification, and replication. So by changing the length of the varied criterion levels, right? So maybe one is 3, and then the next one requires 5 sessions, let's say, at that particular criterion. Then in doing that, we're able to make predictions about behavior would continue at that particular criterion level if we weren't to make any additional changes. And then we verify that prediction by extending that session out. And then each time that we're changing the criterion level, the first time is the initial demonstration. And then after that, we're replicating that. But by doing so in the reverse direction, that is a mini reversal. Using that bidirectional criterion, that is a further strengthening of our demonstration of replication because it goes against the sort of the expected continued increase, right?
And as you change the magnitude, if you sort of make some like smaller jumps, maybe one slightly larger jump, if you see that stable responding around the new criterion, so the sort of, the dependent variable points are sort of on your new changed criterion line, that is another way to demonstrate a strengthening. There are 2 variations on the changing criterion design, both by McDougall. One is the range-bound changing criterion design.
Yeah, more on that coming up.
Where instead of just sort of saying, here's our new criterion, it's 5 or whatever, you have an upper and a lower criterion at each of your different kind of sub-phases. This is recommended to use when you're worried that gains going too quickly could cause injury or impact your long-term change. And it increases experimental control some because you show that behavior change is sort of sensitive to 2 criterions, the upper and the lower limit. However, you also are then telling someone like you can't respond any farther than these ranges. So, it might have
to receive the reinforcer.
To receive the reinforcer. So,
that's how it should be.
Yeah. And then they also describe a second one, the distributed criterion design, which I'm just going to kind of quote this because the article didn't care too much to describe this beyond this paragraph. You can manipulate one behavior across interdependent but discrete contexts or interdependent behaviors in one context. It's sort of seen as maybe like a behavior, you'd use it in a maybe behavior management program, but the authors then say this design is weak and they don't want to talk about it anymore. So we won't talk about it anymore as well because it's apparently not a best practice. It's a worse
and we'll
practice.
Leave it at that.
Or a mediocre practice, maybe not worse. The range-bound changing criterion design, I did like that, and again, like you said, Diana, one of our explanation or example articles will use the range-bound criterion.
Yeah. The distributed one, I believe, is trying to get at like bringing in like multiple behaviors and then sort of attempting to demonstrate them within this model, so the axis is no longer modifying along some numeric value, but now modifying along a variety of behavioral axes. I don't know if I'm describing this well either because I also haven't used it. And the potential challenge here is that you end up doing just a bunch of A/B designs that if you had arranged it differently, you could have made this into like a multiple baseline across behaviors or across participants or something like that by staggering those initial baselines. But if you just have it set up where you had the same number of baseline and then you started doing like some of these like permutations, then you kind of just have a weak A/B design, right? So the strength of the changing criterion design is usually in being able to pinpoint that reinforcement criterion and then demonstrating that behavior adheres to that criterion without going very much below or over that. But another key point here that you kind of brought up is that there has to be the opportunity for the individual to respond in some pre-operant manner such that they could respond above or below the set criterion. Because if it's
you don't
just
stop, you're like, oh, you met it, bye. You don't do that, right?
Yeah.
You have to give them the opportunity.
right, you don't like rip away the worksheet when 5 are done, because then all that's happened is you've taken away the opportunity for additional responding versus showing that their behavior is contingent upon the particular reinforcement criterion that's in place or responding to that criterion, I should say. So that's, I think, a really important point of the CCD, and sometimes that can not fully be present, and that would demonstrate to me a weaker representation of the CCD.
Yeah. So what
We say that CCD is changing criterion design.
Yeah,
It is, yes. It's
changing
not like
design.
the Catholic.
Right. CCD classes.
I'm not Catholic, but it's like,
Yeah.
that's where you're like learning communion.
So like
Yeah.
if somebody maybe like started this podcast and then ignored it for the first
Yeah.
like 10 minutes and
Yeah.
then suddenly hear us talk about CCD, they're like, whoa, this got like really religious and spiritual. all
No,
of a
Right.
sudden.
Or it could be like, how many Bible verses do you learn at CCD using a CCD design? How
Oh,
many
wow.
do you memorize per week?
Wow. That sounds like a socially
meta.
significant problem that needs to be solved. I mean, I don't know. I don't teach CCD. Maybe they're like, if only
I
there
don't
were
know
a
what they
better
do
way
there
to teach
either.
more verses. How's everyone going to learn Genesis? All
I
right.
really prefer Peter Gabriel on his own.
Oh.
But
All right, let's see. Oh, here are some other best practices to know. One question always comes up of like, what do I choose for my first criterion? And the major way most researchers will choose that first criterion are either using the mean of the baseline rate, having the mean of the baseline rate using that, choosing the highest or lowest point at baseline if you want to do a range, or you get someone who knows what it is you're trying to change, like a professional in whatever the change dimension is, and you say, hey, what do you think would be a good target to start? And the authors actually say that's their favorite because it's the most sensitive to the ability of the individual versus just like, I don't know, you were around here, so 10% more seems like a good number, which is not necessarily best practice. You want to have at least 2 criterion changes to demonstrate control, though some people say 3 might be a better minimum. And then everything else is up to you. What's the phase magnitude? What's the phase length? Do you want to use mini reversals or not? How many shifts will you need? Oh, the sky's the limit when it comes to setting up your changing
be
criterion design.
1 million permutations.
You could do everything, all the changes, and that's it. So again, the authors say it's not always perfect in research, but it is a really nice intervention tool. And then they even said, let's do a survey of studies using changing criterion design before 2014 to determine, are there any other patterns or any other things that we want to know about the changing criterion design? And this is a summary of 106 articles and 267 changing criterion graphs. And some things to keep in mind, at least as of 2014, is that about half of the studies were done with children. 82% were for individuals without a diagnosis, which is very different than most research in our field, where way higher numbers of the studies are participants who have some sort of a reported diagnosis like IDD or autism. Schools were pretty prominently used. About 45% of the studies took place in a school setting, which is interesting. Just like every other study, about half were done by an experimenter or a therapist. But teachers and staff were actually 27% of the studies. So again, a little bit higher than you sometimes see in our other experimental designs. 64% of studies were about increasing behavior, and 57% were looking at frequency as the key dimension, followed by magnitude. This is used a lot for targeting academic behaviors, about 19% of the studies. And then a lot of the other targets were things like sports, or communication, or self-care or safety, or habits, or compliance, or medical. And if you wanted to know what actually was the highest of all of these, it was other.
Well, yeah. Did you ever read that study where they were looking at trying to decrease smoking consumption and someone was smoking like 6 packs a day?
Mm-hmm.
So you couldn't really so there would be like, oh, I can't remember what it was, but like go cold turkey, right? Like, so that's why this change in criterion design, it's like decreasing this bad habit.
Well, in terms of what category of study?
That would be other.
One thing they did note, and this is going to come into best practices language, is that very few of these studies actually had any sort of behavior assessment or preference assessment included, which seems odd because if you're trying to change behavior, you probably want to know the function. Although if we're talking about sports, like what's the function of trying to get better at throwing your baseball or soccer goals? Like, I don't know, you want to get better. Automatic reinforcement, some sort of socially mediated consequence, right? But preference assessment seems like they'd be pretty important in terms of helping individuals sort of identify what they want to earn as they reach their criterion, right? Or what they want to happen. A lot of the studies, about 71%, use some sort of a contingency as an intervention, though 22% used no contingencies at all. Usually it was reinforcement, it's about 73%, though some of these studies, about 22%, used a punishment procedure. What was interesting is that a lot of the studies, like we kind of already mentioned, used some sort of, it says 70%, which the math doesn't add up. So I think it's more of like an addition to the reinforcement, but they weren't super clear. I went and double checked because I was like, these numbers are that's 140% or 170%. But they use some sort of non-reinforcement or non-punishment strategy like feedback or modeling or prompting or self-monitoring or some sort of like a contract. So there are a good number of these studies that did not use, what we'd think of as just contingency management. They used other strategies. About 10% used this CCD as their shaping procedure. And a lot of them they kind of looked very closely at sort of the designs, and again, a lot of them used kind of a weaker A/B designs, about 63%. The 70 of those studies, so, used a multiple baseline design with a CCD within it, usually across some sort of behavior. So they're changing multiple aspects of multiple behaviors, right? Which sounds very hard to keep track of. And 63% of the studies did not do any kind of reversal, whether a regular reversal or a mini reversal, which they were not happy about.
Yeah, I know. That's the
authors
issue.
Not happy about.
I also have issue.
Yeah. And what percentage above baseline were used? It's like all over the place. It's like kind of averaged out in a lot of ways. It's like 9% used a 5% above or below baseline. 11% used a 5 to 15. 21% used 15 to 35. 21% used 35 to 100%. 35% of the studies actually went 100% over the mean of baseline as their first criterion. But again, that sounds really stupid. Like, why would you want to go that high? Usually the baseline was 0. So it mathematically became above 100%.
I don't think
it doesn't really work that way. That's how they report
0 is still 0.
I think what they meant is just the idea of there was no behavior occurring and then there was.
Well, they had to pick somewhere to start. That? Sure.
It's more than 100%, but you're right. Mathematically, it's undefined. So there are lots of ways to use the changing criterion design, but a lot of studies, at least as of 2014, used pretty poor experimental control. Only 25% of the studies they looked at did the authors say, you know what? I think experimental control was solidly determined. And usually the failure was a little variation in phase magnitude and no reversals at all. So shame, shame, shame. And they also saw a lot of, smaller variations of things like phase length, or maybe only 2 changes in the criterion. Sometimes they'd use, like you were saying, Diana, restricted responding, which is its own problem. But with all that said, if you wanted to get better experimental control, just don't do what 75% of these studies did, in that you want to have a mini reversal. You want to have more variation in your phase magnitude. You want to have more than 2 changes in criterion. You don't want to restrict responding. But some other key things.
Just do those things.
Yeah,
those things you mentioned, and you will be doing better than 75% of published research in this area.
They also say if you're changing behavior that it seems worthwhile, maybe do an FBA to determine the function. Definitely use a preference assessment. And it also wasn't super clear how many of the studies were including the individual in determining what they want their criterion to be. So add that component, why don't you? How high do you want to go? Where do you want to be? Why is that a good or bad idea? Like, be a part of the study itself, right? And then also include more training of the client into using the changing criterion design themselves. So it's not something being done to them. It's something that they are a part of.
Absolutely.
So not just looking at their consent to being part of your study, actually being active participants in the study, and using more social validity measures.
There's so many apps that could do this for you.
Yeah, this feels like a very easy one to sort of track and then graph for you and then let you see your stepwise changes, right?
Yeah.
But I'm sure, you know what? I'm sure there's one that actually does this, but I don't know what it is because there's too many apps.
I more mean like build it in, like Duolingo should like have this model, right? And they'll be like, oh, this is a rest week. You only need to do 3 days this week, right? But it's like you're bi-directional.
They they don't really go down.
Yeah.
They usually progressively get harder.
Yeah.
Until you
It'd be so
miss
easy
one.
to just build it into those things.
Until you miss one and then it goes back down to easy again.
Yeah, but that's different.
That's different.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, now we know some best practices, and most of these are great practices. Are they the best? I need more research there, but I understand. If you wanted to think of what's the best that we know right now,
That's what it means.
What
Fine.
it means.
Yeah.
then they should put that in the title.
When you know better, then you can do better. But that's why we need more of these types of studies.
All right. Well, now that we know what goes into a changing criterion design, the best changing criterion designs, let's take a break. And when we come back, let's describe how they've been used with some example research. We'll be right back.
Hi. Do you want to be a BCBA, also known as a board certified behavior analyst?
Sure, we all do.
Now you can come to Regis College in Weston, Massachusetts to get your graduate degree, just minutes outside of Boston.
Choose from any one of these courses.
Masters of Science in Applied Behavior Analysis.
Masters of Science in Special Education, dual degree in Special Ed and ABA.
Or be eligible for your postmaster certificate.
You can complete your degree and be ready to sit for the exam in 2 years.
And our 2022 graduates had a 92% pass rate on the BACB exam.
Come enjoy approved fieldwork placements, ethics mini handbooks, PhD levels professors, small class sizes, and a service trip to Iceland if interested.
And don't forget, our program is accredited by the Association of Behavior Analysis International, or ABAI, as a Tier 1 master's degree program.
Don't delay. Supplies are limited. Learn more at regiscollege.edu.
Again, that's www.regiscollege.edu.
regiscollege.edu.
One more time, www.regiscollege.edu.
See you there.
Bye.
And we are back talking about the changing criterion design. But before we continue this discussion, I want to remind all of our listeners that ABA Inside Track is ACE and QUABA approved. And by listening to this episode, you're able to earn 1 learning credit. Hooray for you! And for us, for learning about the changing criterion design.
This was my idea because I love this design.
Hooray for Jackie!
And everyone was like, I don't really know. And I was like,
It's
please.
my idea.
Maybe it was both of ours because I actually love this design. I wish I could do all my research on the changing criterion design.
I think there'd be times that it probably wasn't the best fit, though.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
I think like, no, I can absolutely do that. I will.
You're right.
I'll never be published again. And where were we? Oh, yeah, CEs. And all you need to do is finish listening to the episode and then go to our website, abainsidetrack.com, to put in some important information. One of the pieces of information are going to be 2 secret code words that we've hidden in the episode. And I'm going to give you the first of those code words right now. It is GNOME. GNOME. It ain't Alaska. It's the little mythical creature with a funny pointy hat. A gnome. Because why, Diana?
The Gnome-mobile, we're hunting for gnomes in the Gnome-mobile.
That's not why you told me. You said it was Gnome-vember.
That's all that's going through my head right now.
Oh, okay.
But
So
right
I don't
now
know.
It's January, so.
Well, when we recorded, it was Gnome-vember.
But it's January.
We got to get ahead for the holidays, man. We need some time off. So
We went to a local place nearby.
a botanical garden.
Oh, yeah, okay. And they have gnomes out and little like painted statue gnomes. You have to go around all the places and find them, and they're so cute.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's your code word.
Yep.
Gnome. All right. So when we left off, we talked about the best practices for changing criterion designs. Oh, one thing I did love is I always thought the plural of a changing criterion design would be, oh, you need lots of criteria in your changing criterion design. It is not. It is criterions.
Yes, it's criterions.
So if you, like me, were like, well,
Why is that?
the plural of criterion is criteria. True. But if you are talking about the research design, at least according to the best practices article, you want to refer to them as your different criterions, which grammatically makes no sense. But
Interesting. I didn't realize
you
that.
say, yes.
Okay.
Unless the whole thing, unless Klein et al. We're joking with us and they're like, psych, these aren't the best practices. Because
Psych.
we should have used changing criteria when talking about lots of criterions.
Oh my God.
But
Like
let's
the strunk
hope
and
they do.
white for CC or for SCD.
Yep. But let's talk about two examples. The first example is going to be kind of a classic changing criterion design, and then we're going to talk about the range
The RBCC?
changing criterion design. Yes.
You're funny. Well,
The range bound.
range bound.
I've got
Yes.
it taken care of.
Yes. So here's my classic one when we're looking at inactivity in young children. And I guess in the 90s, around this time, they were really focused on making sure that all kids were really fit and healthy.
That feels like every time
I
since
know.
the 80s.
Well, they're really wanting to do it.
Probably the President's Fitness Challenge was
probably-
happening.
They couldn't
By-
pass their president's physical
By the way,
fitness test.
I cannot do the V-sit and reach. I do yoga every
That's the
single
only
day.
part of it I'm good at.
Oh, I cannot. I
I've
cannot.
never
be-
done a pull-up,
Oh, I can pull
but
up.
I think I just have arms that are more disproportionately longer than my legs, so I can reach past my toes.
Well, I cannot. And
Is it a pull up or a chin up?
you had to do both.
you had to do both.
Oh.
And then
And
you
I
have to
just-
climb the
Hung there.
rope. I would have loved to see that, by the way. Anyway,
What about the shuttle run? You do the shuttle run?
Yeah, I could do the shuttle run slowly.
so the previous research really kind of looked at this as well. They looked at using a fixed ratio, and we all know that fixed ratio has this break and run pattern, right? And so 1 minute of duration counted as one ratio, like one frequency thing. And that was really effective. So they really wanted to look at previous research and extend it using the variable ratio schedule, because what we know about simple schedules of reinforcement is the variable schedule makes this very high, stable responding on a cumulative record.
Yeah.
And so they're like, okay, maybe we can further increase exercise, both the time you're exercising and the amount that you're exercising to see. And they wanted to use a changing criterion design because it can start at a participant's specific level and we don't have to do it as a group, right? So each participant had their own individual baselines and we moved from there. So they didn't have to do a lot of group stuff and they could gradually increase via small successive increases. So they had 6 11-year-old boys. They were at school. They were asked if they wanted to participate in this research. They said, do you want to come and exercise on a stationary bike in the nurse's office 5 days a week? And all of them said yes.
Oh.
Yeah. And so
Whatever was happening in class must have been really boring.
You change the criterion for more interest in class.
So 3 were considered of typical weight and 3 were considered over 20% at least of their typical body weights. None of the boys were taking medicines. All were considered healthy and none were doing any weight control management. The boys that they were calling obese were at least in the 97th percentile for weight and ranged around 32% to 161% over the range of what their typical body weight should have been. And the non-obese boys were around 50%. One was slightly higher, but they said, oh, it fell in the range, so it's fine. All were of average height, and this took place in my favorite place, Winnipeg in Canada.
Oh.
So they probably had to exercise, and it was probably in the winter, and that's why they had to ride bikes in the nurse's office because it snows nonstop there. I went there once for a job interview, and there was a husky walking down the street in a full snowsuit.
Wow.
Oh my God. That's adorable.
Awesome. Yep, it was very cold out.
Did he have an owner?
Yeah.
Maybe it's a wolf.
He was walking on 2 feet, actually. I guess everyone walks. Every Husky's a Husky town. All right, so all they needed is a stationary bike. And this time, I think this is clever. They counted 1 wheel rotation as the response.
A pedal.
Yep, a pedal. And it makes that sound. And on the bike, there was a bell and a light that went off on a VR schedule. And each time the bell and the light went off, a point was delivered to the boy. And then the boys could trade on those points for backup reinforcers at the end of the session. They also noted that bikes were set to moderately low resistance, so it wasn't like they were like making them
It wasn't a spin
truck
class.
up the hill. Yeah. So they took baseline for 8 sessions until stability was demonstrated. And again, like I said, each boy served as their own baseline. Then they added the VR criteria for 8 sessions. That was sub-phase 1. Then, and so what it was is 50.
Yeah, I think it was a VR Criterion.
Oh, so sorry. So sorry. That was sub-phase 1, and that was 15% above baseline was what they wanted. And then the second sub-phase was 15% above that. And then the third one was 15% above that.
So they went with the classic, I'm going to pick a number,
Yep.
and
then
that's good
go
enough.
with it. Yep.
Those are fairly big jumps, though.
Huge jumps. Yep. And then they reverted back to baseline where nothing happened. There was
A
no
mini
light.
reversal, you say?
A mini reversal. Yep. And then they went back to that third VR schedule.
Ooh, they used 3 different criterions.
They did a good job for 5 sessions at the end to see what happened.
Well, except for that 15%. They should have asked a professional stationary
They should have.
bike person.
Hi.
That's-
I'm an expert in stationary cycling.
They didn't have those in the 90s, I guess. So,
I bet they did.
Why wouldn't they? That's like peak
That was
stationary bike time.
Jane Fonda jazz.
I was just going to say.
Yeah.
Jane
Richard
Fonda.
Simmons.
Oh,
Your
yeah.
put on your leggings, then
Yep.
put on your swimsuit, then put on your belt,
Yeah.
And then get your hair.
Your headband.
then put on your leg
bands, get your
warmers,
wristbands.
Yeah, you
so that
need all
don't
of this.
sweat.
and your Reeboks.
There you go. Okay. So here's the point here is that all the boys went in individually and they could exercise as long as they liked. So they could get off at any time, which is nice when you think about ascent, because I know we just talked about ascent. So I was thinking about that.
Yes.
Or until 30 minutes at a lap because they can't just ride bikes all day.
No.
Much to their sadness
Right.
because the boys did ask to ride more. And that was one of their subjective
Limited
measurements
responding.
of social validity is that the boys were like, can we invite our friends and can we ride more for more points? So that was
What
fun.
did they trade the points in for?
Toys.
Okay.
They actually did a reinforcer assessment here. So I'll tell you about
Oh,
that.
there we go. That's a best practice.
Yeah. So prior to the first session, again, the child were asked if they wanted to exercise, and then they did. So they had a reinforcer survey that each of the boys took for backup reinforcers, and they took the top 10 were chosen. Higher preference items were used for higher ratio requirements, and they were like typical toys, right? So they brought a whole like bunch of 10 toys, they laid them out, and they just had to earn points for those toys. Yeah. So that's all they really did. And it worked for the most part, right? All 6 boys had very low rates of baseline, responding in baseline. And then when the VR schedule, most of them conformed to the schedule, except for one boy went a bit higher.
Well, they all kind of went a little higher. That's that first criterion. They all were
A little bit higher.
I mean, it
but
wasn't like crazy high. Well, there was that one who was almost making like exponential growth for a
Right.
little bit, or like reverse exponential growth.
right. And this is they're looking at mean revolutions per minute, so it's like the response per minute. But then when you see the increase, each of the 3 VR increases, the data conform to that. So each time that they increase the response requirement, the boys followed on suit, right? And they did a great job. When they returned to baseline, you saw behavior decrease.
Oh, and I misspoke. I said it was a mini reversal. This was just a reversal.
It
Yeah,
was
just a-
back to baseline.
Back to
Yeah.
baseline. And then when they went back to the third VR, everyone conformed back to where their schedule was for the most part. There was more increases above the criterion than there were decreases.
I wonder how hard it was to know at the time how close you were to the criterion level.
I don't think you didn't.
Because it's like and it's a mean revolutions across the entire session.
Yeah, Sue. I don't
Right?
think they know.
Like-
So I think
They just were getting.
That's
They
why
knew
the
they were getting.
VR
That
points,
might have
so they
been why
weren't.
it was more variable than you wanted.
Yeah.
Because there was probably a little bit of guesswork involved there
Right.
for them to know if am I actually going fast enough.
Right, or
it-
not.
Or maybe it was reported to them differently based on like what was available on
for
the
them.
screens. It was like
Yeah.
these
There
were
was
like
no
the
screens.
old,
there was no
It's just
screen.
the light.
old kind of.
Yeah, it's just the
bike.
light and the sound.
They just knew
Nothing.
they were getting
Nothing.
points.
Yeah, they just knew they were getting
And all they
points.
would know is I am getting points. I'm doing points.
And then they would just bike until
So the experimenter was giving out the points as it went.
no, they had a bell
A bell
and
and
a light. A bell and a light.
My lord.
So each time the bell and light went off, they got a point tally.
But how is the bell going off?
because it's on a variable ratio schedule of a revolution of the bike.
Okay.
Right? So let's say
Some sort of
I've read the study multiple
electromechanical-
times and still never really fully understood.
Okay, here. So here we go.
Okay.
How about this? So they set it up So, like maybe the third revolution, the bell would pop up, right? Then the sixth revolution, the bell would pop up. It was predetermined. The experimenter programmed the bell light to the revolutions prior to the kids coming in.
I'm sure it was some sort of a circuit board situation.
Yeah, they explained it.
Okay.
But it was...
Okay, great.
Yes. And then the other thing that I found interesting was their other figure where they looked at how much people were exercising. And this actually, I feel like this second graph is great clinically, but it kind of undermines the changing criterion design.
Yeah, totally.
Right? Because it is, oh, look, after we put reinforcement in, everybody exercised to 30 minutes and wanted to do more. But right, we talked about best practice and you have to keep going.
Yeah, there's a ceiling
effect here. So this kind of undermines their last graph a little bit.
Yeah.
But everyone was
That's
happy.
okay.
Yeah.
I think that's fine.
It is fine, right?
That wasn't the main criterion.
No. Everyone was happy with the results and everyone exercised the same at the end, no matter what boy you were. So that's great. Boys asked if their friends could participate because they found it fun. They asked if they could bicycle longer. And then they were like, the participants were like, all the boys actually convinced their parents to buy them bikes now because now they like biking.
Yeah, kudos to the editor of this one for allowing what is like one of the sweetest little like epilogues in the discussion of like
Right?
one boy's parents said he
Peter.
finally loved going outside,
Yes.
playing, and he loves playing now, and oh, they never thought it could be true for that. It was really nice.
Yeah, Peter. He went from a size 36 to a size 32. Everyone said he was unrecognizable, shy boy before, now very happy. The principal even said he made a dramatic change.
Yep.
He's doing better in
nice.
school. He's swimming.
Yep.
He's doing like other activities. So, they all participated in a track and field event at school. And they all did well. One did really well and went to the state championships.
Yeah.
And the parent, the discussion was like very heartfelt.
But I don't think any of them played hockey after, so Winnipeg would consider this a failure.
Yeah,
of a
they really
study.
absolutely would.
No hockey stars.
Because then it was summer vacation.
There's no excuse when you play hockey in Canada.
And then the funny thing,
It's a four-season sport.
right? They said future research should look at girls because we have not.
Right. Yeah. It's like 51% of the
only
population.
boys.
Only
So-
boys like bikes.
Yeah.
There you go. But I like this study not because it talks about
I like
these boys
the
and girls,
study.
but the design
It seems
is well thought of.
unnecessary
Yes.
to break it down by obese and non-obese.
I agree.
The results are
They
not
don't change.
You
broken
could have
down.
just said increasing bike
You don't
riding
need
it.
in
You're right.
boys.
You're right.
Yes,
That's true.
You don't need it at all.
You don't
It
need
doesn't
it.
matter. And then the way that they named the boys also, I find upsetting.
Oh, I didn't
we
think I
don't even have
noticed.
to get into it.
Okay, I didn't think I even noticed.
What? There was a theme?
Yes.
I didn't
So
notice
the
theme.
non-obese boys are all start with an S, and the obese boys all start with a P. And I
Okay.
feel like it's like skinny versus some other.
Pounds?
Oh, I
some
didn't even
other.
notice.
I think there's a lot of things P could be that
Oh.
like
Didn't
I don't
even-
like it, but
I
that
did-
might not be what the authors meant.
I didn't even
It
notice.
was also
that.
a long time ago.
Sure, 90s.
and maybe they would do something differently now. So
Sure. Okay.
yeah,
Good. It's a good. It shows the design well. I did not even see that.
I know
Oh, there we go.
it is a good demonstration
of changing criteria
Absolutely.
design. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, let's get out of the just disgusting 90s. Let's move into the modern, enlightened era.
My mom totally had one of those like
Stationary
stationary
bikes.
bikes.
My grandma had one too.
I bet that
But
thing
it-
weighed 500 pounds. It was just like pure, just metal all over the place.
So heavy. No one
Yeah.
ever used it. It just hung clothes on it.
It probably had one of those things you're like, oh, I want to change the amount of like weight resistance, and you'd like turn the rusty
Yeah.
knob on the bottom.
It did have like a little odometer type of thing that showed you how fast you were going.
Did it light up?
It didn't
when you,
light
when
up
you went?
or ding. No.
Oh, well, you got no points for riding a bike. You just had to do it for fun.
For funsies.
All right, I want to go back to the future and talk about the range bound.
All right, this one is
criteria
in the
design.
distant future, the year 2022. And
By future, I mean past.
I really liked this episode. So just as a reminder to everyone, the title here was Using Mnemonics, Remote Coaching, and the Range-Bound Changing Criterion Design.
By episode, do you mean this article?
Is that what I said?
You said, I love the fact that I really like this episode. And some people might say, oh, Diana just got a little confused. In Diana's notes, I like the focus of this episode.
Sorry. Yeah. Well, every time I introduce the articles, I also say, we had a couple good episodes.
Yeah, that's
this
true.
Be careful,
episode.
folks. If you do 10 years of podcasting, everything becomes an episode.
Yeah.
Life is an episode. She's like, man, this episode was great
This
today.
episode.
Somebody should watch this episode.
I measure my life in
When
like,
I
what
go to
episode
bed.
did I do? What research did I
talking
read
about-
for this episode?
I'm talking about her life episode.
Oh,
Yeah.
there's lots of episodes.
Each day is a life episode.
On my own TV show.
I'd watch it.
Okay. So I really liked this article in that they, sort of couched their research that they were doing here within, I think, what they viewed as important work. So they talk about why you want to focus on preparedness for employment, for students and individuals with intellectual disability. They talk about the value of employment. It contributes to self-worth and quality of life. Only 10% of people with intellectual disabilities are part of the paid integrated workforce, and that really results in poor employment outcomes for this population, underemployment, lack of financial independence, lower quality of life, etc. So they say we can, work to improve this by introducing work-based learning opportunities in post-secondary education settings. And so work-based learning means using paid or unpaid work opportunities to what they called increase employability by teaching a lot of pre-employment type skills. And they said a great option is having these programs built into IPSE, which is inclusive post-secondary education. They found that individuals who participate in those programs produce more employment opportunities and higher salaries for them over time. So these work-based learning opportunities can help to build pre-employment skills, and that could include a bunch of different things, but the one that this study focuses on is decision-making skills. And so what they were really focused on here was decision-making skills related to whether one might want to have a particular type of job, because that could influence the choices that you then make in terms of job sampling and doing some of these paid or unpaid work opportunities. So that was, there's like a million things that could be targeted here, but that was just one of them. Yes. And so they said you could work on these decision-making skills, again, a lot of ways, but one way that we want to look at is using a mnemonic device. And I love saying that word.
Pronounced mnemonic.
Mnemonic. And they said there's evidence for this in the past. And a mnemonic device is just a way to remember something.
Mm-hmm.
So like
my very educated mother.
just served us 9 pizzas, except now it's just nachos.
Oh, okay.
Which is no Pluto anymore. Right? Or like the Great Lakes or homes. You can remember them that way. I could keep going, but I won't.
Nope, that's good.
Okay. So they said that mnemonic devices have been used in the past for helping folks remember how to complete job applications or make decisions about job preferences, etc. You could also use covert audio coaching, and they incorporated that here, which is obviously why it is coming up. In this one, they specifically did remote audio coaching, so it was via Zoom. So the current study is an extension of 2 previous studies by some of the authors of the study here, Kearney and Torres, 2022, and Torres et al. 2021. And the current study was combining remote audio coaching with teaching / using the mnemonic device to teach employment decision-making skills to college students with intellectual disabilities. And the reason why we're talking about it today is because they used a range-bound changing criterion design in order to do this whole thing. So before I tell you about that, there were 3 participants in this study. They were all in this IPSE program at a local college for students with some type of intellectual disability. These students had that diagnosis as well as an ASD diagnosis. So there was Davida, who was aged 20, Kara, aged 24, and Hunter, aged 24 as well. And it was all done via Zoom. But their parents had been instructed to not interfere with the sessions, basically.
Don't.
Yeah, don't.
I forgot they had a term they kept using. It was another acronym. And I kept being like, I don't remember what that procedure was. I remember else as their mnemonic.
Yeah.
And then I realized, they just gave a fancy name to, we used like bug-in-ear technology over Zoom.
Oh, that's RAC.
The RAC.
It's remote audio coaching.
I was very annoyed at the addition of an acronym for and we just talked to them over Zoom with Bluetooth headset. Like, that doesn't need a name.
Yeah.
You just did that. That's what you did.
That's what you did. Yeah. So the McDougall is also an author on this one. And McDougall, 2005, is the one that introduced the range-bound changing criterion design idea as an option.
McDougall just like in every research meeting? I don't know, everybody. What about a range-bound criterion design, huh? It's like, fine, whatever, McDougall.
Trust me. So the idea here with the range bound is that rather than there being a single criterion that needs to be met, there is a range instead. So instead of it being like, oh, you have to do 5, you could do 4 to 6. And
that.
Anywhere within the range.
Criterion and lower criterion.
Exactly. Yeah. So anywhere within the range receives the reinforcer. This gives people a little bit more autonomy, right? They talk about it in terms of it being a purposeful, stepwise progression. And the advantage here is that you could use it to potentially shape new skills. It also is great because the participant doesn't do too much too soon, is how they described it. Because doing too much too soon could lead to careless errors, overly variable responding, or impulsive responding. So the idea here is that we're going to go slow and steady. You have some choice in the matter, but you need to respond within this range in order to receive the reinforcer. So it kind of prevents people from moving too quickly through the steps.
Mm-hmm. I was gonna say, I don't know if they necessarily demonstrate like it does teach better. You know, it's in the discussion. Like it does teach better because the change in range allowed them to focus their answer.
No,
but
we don't know.
It sounds good. Like that sounds like a good reason to use it. Whether or not that is actually what is happening, you know, it didn't seem like it hurt.
Yeah, it's true that you don't really know if that is an advantage, but it's an option, I guess you could say. And then within the RBCC, you can still do the bidirectional criterion, which we've already discussed as being pretty advantageous if you're looking to establish stronger experimental control with the CCD. So that would be an advantage here.
You can do a mini reversal.
Yeah. And then in this study, they also added in a generalization condition and a follow-up condition at the end. So they have a lot going on here, I think, to demonstrate the strength of this design for this purpose. So the DV was, what was the DV?
It was like how many of
what I wrote down is not correct.
I think it was like how many components of the else mnemonic did they do?
So they used the mnemonic. The mnemonic was available, but that wasn't the DV. I don't know why I wrote that. The DV was how many reasons did they give for whether a particular job would be good for them.
Yeah. According to, and they scored it according to like which of the mnemonics in the else acronym. Yeah,
kind of. Well, at the end of it all, it was just total number of responses. So
how many answers did you give, pretty much?
Yes. That's awesome. I don't know yet. I don't know, guys. So the mnemonic was ELSE, E-L-S-E, and they actually have the little picture in the article of what that looked like, and they showed it on a PowerPoint screen to the participants during the appropriate time. So E is the education level required for this job a good fit for me? So they could respond to that. L, do I like the particular job responsibilities? S, do I have the skills needed for this job? And then E again, am I satisfied with the earnings of this job? And they can answer each of those by thinking about, what is needed for the job? And then do I kind of fit those criteria? So there's like 2 components to each of the else parts of the mnemonic. Oh, there it is. The criterion was the number of reasons provided by the student on whether they did or did not want the job in question. And then the materials, they used a website called careeronestop.org, which has a lot of little video and photo vignettes available on there of different jobs, different vocations, which is kind of cool. So within each session, this was all done via Zoom, like I said. In the baseline, the experimenter asked them, which job do you want to learn about or consider today, A or B? So they built in choice, which I love. The participant selected one of them. They then watched the video from the careeronestop.org website. And then they said, do you think this is a good job for you? Tell me the reasons. And they didn't give them any other guidance in the baseline condition. And then in the intervention, they did basically what we just described, but they added in some additional components. So they also, in making the decision on where they're going to start the criterion for the changing criterion design, they did what you already suggested, Rob, which is they asked around. So they asked 12 vocational rehabilitation counselors what they thought were an appropriate number of reasons that a college student with an intellectual disability might give in order to help find a job that's right for them. And they call this their reality base for their target criterion. So the lower boundary was a mean of 3 reasons, and the upper was a mean of 7, with a total range of 1 to 10, depending on the person. And then they use that as a gauge, but then for each individual participant, they really chose their own levels anyway, but it was just to make sure they weren't totally off base. So in the intervention, they set it up the same way. They said, please tell me X range of reasons why you might want this job. And so the ranges were tell me 2 to 3 reasons. Tell me 4 to 6 reasons, etc. And then they would provide as many reasons as they could. And then if they needed more assistance, the experimenter pointed them towards the else mnemonic and said, oh, well, you could also think about, what the earnings are and try to help them along those ways.
Yeah, but they could choose which one from else. They just have to.
Yeah, they could choose. And then the final criterion was set at 11 reasons, and they talked about that at length. In phases 2 and 3, they went on to have a few more in the range each time. And then phase 4 required a lower range. So they did do the bidirectional criterion here.
Mini reverse.
Yeah, that too. And then the only thing that I was like, as they said, the session ended after the student provided the requested number of reasons. So did they totally shut it down at that point? Or did they say maybe is there anything else, or did they have the student say, I'm all done saying reasons? If they had just had one of those phrases in there, I would be I would feel satisfied that they didn't remove the opportunity to respond further. But as it's written, I actually can't quite tell. So maybe they did, and that part just didn't get included.
If they said anything else, so that's a prompt. Maybe you should say one more. If they say, that's enough, this interview is over, that's what an interview really would end. You have some sort of response restriction in an actual interview, but you're right, they could they just keep going? So, it's a little bit of a weakening of the design. But again, the purpose of this is to have them do better job interviews, not necessarily just to have the strongest experimental design. And they did use a mini reversal. They did use
absolutely
multiple
did.
criterions.
They varied the length of the phases as well. So they did all those things awesomely. And then they also, like I said, had a generalization and a follow-up. So the generalization was with a job coach, so not the experimenter. They did those throughout and looked to see when there weren't any of these additional range-bound criteria in place, what did the individual do? They lined up pretty closely, actually, with the actual data. And then they did a follow-up at the end later on. The follow-up levels were a little bit lower, but again, the criteria weren't in place. And they were much higher than baseline. So in that sense, they achieved their goal.
And some of the final targets were higher than the job coaches had suggested they go.
Yeah. No, it was starkly different from the beginning. And then they also did a percentage of conforming data analysis. This was another acronym. The PCD, that was in there. That was from McDougall et al. 2006.
Jeez, McDougall's just throwing all their stuff in there.
Guys killing it, yeah.
Great about that.
And this looked great as well. So looking to see how far off of the criteria were they.
McDougall, stop trying to make fetch happen.
He made it happen. I believe it's a man. So it looked good. It was 100% for the intervention and then 67% for the generalization. Because there was some variability, but I don't feel like that's an issue like you would expect there to be.
It fell along the ranges.
I know.
It
did. Yeah.
One
one or
data
two.
point,
Yeah.
maybe 2 if you count a generalization outside of those ranges is nice.
I love the range, actually. It gives you
I will use it.
It gives you a hot place, you
I know. I like the range as well. Yeah.
We're teasing McDougall a little, but we do love this range
Hot
bound
range.
criterion design.
Yes. And the author of this study is Brady, just to make sure.
Yes.
Giving Brady at all the credit here as well. Don't want anything to be misconstrued there. Everyone did social validity. The participants, the VR counselors, everybody loved it. And that might be all I need to tell you
I think so.
about this study.
It's a great example of using the range-bound criterion design for a really socially significant behavior. I love the
Yeah, it's cool. The graph is cool to
job
look at.
interview skill coaching.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, all of these skills are pointless now because you're supposed to just write your information into ChatGPT to send it off to a business where they use ChatGPT to not give anybody a job. Unfortunately, that's the new way to do job interviews.
Oh,
Sad.
Rob, we're all so tired.
Trenchant commentary from Rob over here. Oh, well. But back in the old days, before ChatGPT,
Okay.
this was great. 2022, the last time you would actually talk to a human about why you thought you'd be a good fit for a job. I'm getting a face. All right. Well, thanks, Diana. Well, that's
You
it.
bet.
Let's move into the dissemination station. Oh, well, I got to grind the gears of the train a little more over here with this AI commentary. My AI Type 5. I guess, what did we learn about the changing criterion design?
That it's useful.
Let's do a little more than just it's useful.
I think it's useful, and that I think we all love the range more than just the arbitrary
A range bound versus
the range bound versus the arbitrary percentage wise, so that it gives you more of it gives you more of set boundaries of when it's appropriate versus when it's not, right? So I think that we like that.
Yeah. Well, you still, even with the range bound though, you still have to decide: are you increasing, decreasing by
100%. Yeah,
or with professional guidance,
right? But you still have that range where if it falls anywhere in that range, you're good.
Yeah.
Whereas if you don't have the range, you're like, it needs to fall exactly on this criterion. And like, well, what's acceptable? 3 above, 4 below? You don't really know. 5 below, wink, wink, everyone.
What?
It's a store.
Oh, I know. You made it sound sexy.
Oh, I didn't mean to. I just actually just.
You should see what you can get for $5. Wow.
This is the first year I've ever been to 5 Below, and I was like, wowed. So
it's a fun store.
It's a great store.
It's a fun little store.
I think the other thing that we came about is that we need more research, actually, right?
Yeah.
On the changing criterion design a little bit.
I mean, it's not necessarily more research. It's we need more research using stringent criteria as to how to effectively use the changing criterion design. It needs to have, like we said, you want to have three or so criterion is a good minimum. You want to have varying phase lengths. Maybe try your range bound. Maybe have a professional help you talk about what changes would be appropriate changes to make as you're setting your criterions. Make sure to say criterions, not criteria.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, change the magnitude of the shifts as you can within those ranges. Kind of nice. I'm curious, could you combine an increase, decrease in the width of the ranges to capture some of that magnitude shift between the criterion?
Probably.
I wonder.
Maybe.
Or would that just be not showing any experimental control? My range was 0 to 100. Look at this.
Wow.
Responding stayed there.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe within reason.
Right. And I also think that this is helpful for clinicians when they're thinking about behavior management programs or behavior change programs, that you don't need to go from 0 to 100 all the time.
Yeah.
Right? You can make small successive changes, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's necessary.
Well, let's hope that folks start using a little bit more changing criterion now that they have a better sense of some of the limitations that they themselves can control for to make a better design. All right, and that's it for the changing criterion design. Thank you all so much for listening to this episode of ABA Inside Track. If you want even more ABA Inside Track, please subscribe to our show wherever you like to get your podcasts. You can also subscribe on our Patreon page, patreon.com/ABA Inside Track, to get all of our episodes a week ahead of time. And if you subscribe at the $5 and $10 levels, you're able to get access to all of our polls, including our listener choice and book club polls. Listener choice episodes are chosen by you once a season, and you get a free CE for listening. At the $10 level, you also get access to our book club episodes the minute they come out. Everyone else, you got to wait a whole year, and you don't get 2 free CEs for listening to our discussion of books. We got some upcoming books or books that came out. We just did Atomic Habits. So if you were like, I kind of want to read Atomic Habits, maybe you want to listen to the podcast first, and you'll hear our detailed review of the book.
My life's going to get so much better now.
Again, that's patreon.com/ABA Inside Track. You can also find us on abainsidetrack.com, where you can find links to all of the articles that we discussed on this and all of our previous episodes, as well as a place to purchase CEs. And speaking of purchasing CEs, if you go there for that purpose, you better know our second secret code word. It's garden, GARDEN. Whether it's a secret garden or a garden that everyone can find, you just need to know it's a garden.
Soundgarden.
Could be a sound garden. Yeah.
Do I get to do pairings or no?
Oh, yeah. I forgot about pairing. Sorry.
Okay, great.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
It's not in the notes, so I didn't see it.
It is.
Oh.
It is now.
It was not there when I looked.
Da, 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 da. It's time for pairings. Pairings is the part of the show where I tell you about past episodes you might want to check out if you thought this one was interesting.
I changed the criterion for where the secret code word went.
Okay.
It's range bound. It could be before or after pairings.
You got to tell me ahead of time if you want my behavior to conform. Here you go. You could listen to episode 111, Behavior Analytic Language, episode 113, Visual Inspection of Data, episode 146, Elopement with Dr. Megan Boyle. And the reason is because that is an excellent example of a changing criterion design. We just didn't talk about it today because we talked about it then. I meant to say that sooner. Episode 239, Behavioral Instruction with Dr. Kendra Guinness, because we talk about teaching graphing skills. And then episode 256, Acceleration Charts Explained with Jared Van. Yeah, check out any of those. And then I also like to recommend a snack to go with this episode. The snack today is chai lattes and cigarettes.
My favorite.
Because
I know.
You know why? Because the example in like some of our classes is Jackie's decreasing her number of chai lattes per week.
Which was true, actually. I did use a change of criterion design for this.
I know. Yeah.
And there was another example of someone smoking 6 packs a day.
Yeah. And then the cigarettes are just the classic. So
Classic changing criterion design.
All right. And that was pairings. Please enjoy.
That they made you do in grad school. Remember that time you had to decrease smoking? First you had to take up smoking, then decrease it.
Yeah.
There's a change of criterion increase and then a decrease.
Gross.
You had to do a real reversal at the end. Anyway, thanks so much for listening to ABA Inside Track. We already did all our plug information in the wrong.
We did that.
It's range bound. It's range bound, you see? But, you know, a couple
I think all we got to say is
some last big thanks to Dr. Jim Carr for our intro, outro music, Kyle Sturry for interstitial music, and Dan Thabit of the Podcast Doctors for his amazing editing work. Perhaps he'll edit pairings to go after the other section. Who knows? Then this plug won't make any sense, but he doesn't need to. Wherever it goes, there it is. We'll be back next week with another fun-filled episode. But until then, keep responding. Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.